Welcome to FinanceFeeds Podcasts. FinanceFeeds is the world's premier interactive Forex industry news source, providing the latest insights and current affairs from within the online trading industry worldwide. Enjoy our latest podcast episode. Hi, everyone, and welcome to the FinanceFeeds Podcast. My name is Nikolai Isayev. I'm the editor-in-chief of FinanceFeeds. It's episode 6 of our podcast. Today, we have joining us Tom Higgins, who's founder and CEO of Goldeye. Tom, welcome to our show.
Well, thank you very much, Nikolai. It's very, very lovely to be on your show.
Likewise. We actually see each other or have seen each other quite a bit, I think, over the years at numerous conferences, but I don't think we've actually ever formally met, you and I. So I'm glad that we have this opportunity today, actually, to speak with you.
I'm sure we have. We've been to so many conferences together, haven't we?
Yes. And the last time I think that I saw you was in June in Cyprus at the IFX Expo. And I wanted to find out how that conference was for you on a business, from a business and personal perspective, given that you have so much experience with, all of these kind of conferences.
Yeah, it's funny. Each conference in different parts of the world has a different sort of flavor, and you get a sort of different thing out of them. Because I have been to, I haven't counted actually numbers, but it must be sort of 50 or 60, maybe even 100 conferences around the world. And they all have a different sort of angle. And Cyprus is a real gathering of the entire industry. So everybody gets together. So you don't come along with someone who says, here is a contract I want to sign with you to buy something now. Mm-hmm. It's more about continuing conversations you've been having beforehand, rekindling conversations, seeing people you haven't seen for a while, catching up. And it sort of is like a catalyst to starting conversations later on. And it was very much that way this time. It was great seeing people. We were busy the whole time. Really, really nice to see so many other people from the industry that haven't seen for ages because of all of the COVID stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Well, great. I'm glad that it was productive for you. It was definitely quite productive and hectic for us at FinanceFeeds at that show as well. So listen, summer came and went quickly this year. It's September already. I'm wondering, how did you spend your time? Did you have a chance to enjoy some leisurely activities this summer, or was it all work?
No, it was pretty good actually. I mean, it is work all the time. When you own your own business, you never really sort of stop. But we've got 4 children, 2 dogs, 2 cats, and 6 chickens. So we're pretty busy. We had a nice holiday in Cornwall at the beginning of the summer, and we've just come back from a week in Mykonos with our teenage children who wanted to go and do more of the sort of clubbing type stuff and a bit of last minute sunshine. So that was nice, but it was that was pretty hectic actually. That was pretty busy in Mykonos.
Yeah. So it sounds like it's hectic on all fronts with chickens and kids and all that.
Well, the chickens are probably the easiest of all of them, actually.
I see. I didn't know that you had chickens. I would have thrown in a question into our session today about these types of things. These types of things are quite popular where I live in upstate New York, so not in New York City proper, but more away from the city. And my neighbors have a chicken coop with all kinds of different birds and animals in there as well. So I'm a little bit familiar with these kind of activities.
The chicken world, yeah.
Yeah. So I wanted to talk shop and speak a little bit about Goldeye. So your company's been around for I think over 13 years, pioneering trading technology for retail FX firms, liquidity providers, and lately crypto firms. I wanted to find out, what are you guys focusing on these days in terms of innovations or improvements that come out of your discussions, specifically with your clients? For example, what are your clients asking for, seeking these days in terms of like liquidity, risk management, data services, all of the things that you provide through the so-called growth suite?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, yes, we're just about to celebrate our 14th birthday, which is it's incredible because it's gone so quickly. And every time you think you have a period of stability, something happens in the world that changes everything. So you've just got to sort of I sort of learned never to be complacent and never accept good times, because you know, if there's a good time, there's something bad coming afterwards. So just always be a bit prepared and just be careful. So what we've learned over the last couple of years is the retail FX market was growing at a very high rate years ago. It's sort of stabilized and flattened out, and is now you're not seeing new brokers created all the time. You're seeing some brokers disappear, some new brokers created, and the general focus is on efficiency, being able to do things as cheaply as possible and do things very efficiently, get the best pricing and get the most reliable systems, because there are quite a lot of vendors out there now that there weren't before, and there's quite a good choice, and there's a lot of quite good people. Before there weren't so many. So we've really focused on listening to our clients and putting in place the sort of things that they need. So we talk to them about what their pain points are. We sit with them to see, for example, on the risk management side, we sit with them on the desk and see what they're looking at, what sort of information they need to be able to do their job efficiently, and to be able to keep on top of dodgy trading, for example, things that are going on. Because as a retail broker, they're exposed to everybody, and there's so many traders and so many trades. It's impossible for them to keep track of everything in their heads. I mean, when I started working in FX at a company called ODL Securities about sort of 20 years ago, they used to write all the trades down on a piece of paper because the market was that much smaller. And then the piece of paper got bigger and bigger and bigger and turned into a spreadsheet. And then it became really obvious that this had to be automated, because there was no way you could keep up with that sort of thing. So then systems came in play. And that's the time when I started Goldo, when I realized there was a real demand for someone with business understanding, but also technical understanding, to be able to automate the processes that they needed to make things more efficient. So I'd say that's probably the focus that we've seen over the last few years. Last year has been much more crypto focused, if you want to talk about that now. That's where we've seen a lot of interest, because there's an awful lot of innovation has gone into that side of things.
Yeah, sure, of course. That was actually going to be one of my next questions about your new project. It's called Crypto Switch, I believe, and it's focused specifically on crypto liquidity. If you could tell us a few things about it.
Yeah, so if we go back about 5 years, I was always had an interest in up and coming technology. It's always fascinated me, and I've sort of tried to be a sort of head of the curve on it. And that means that you make quite a lot of mistakes in things that are not going to last and survive, and other things, will do. So you've got to shoot at quite a few different things to be able to get the right things. And so I've always done that. And the Crypto Switch was an interesting angle, because we originally integrated with 9 of the very earliest exchanges, and we did 9 because we needed that number to be able to get a reliable feed, because we found that they were so unreliable, the very early exchanges. You had such terrible latency, terrible gaps in pricing. They had no support available at all. You couldn't talk to anyone at all. They didn't have telephones. And so to be able to get a reliable central price, you needed all these exchanges. Now, this wasn't a tradable price. This was an indicative price that we would feed in for people to be booked. Now, that soon became clear that wasn't going to be good enough. And so we then moved into our Crypto Switch 2 model. And what was different about that is we were working with market makers instead. So we took the sort of the big market makers that had come from the institutional non-crypto world. They'd spun off separate companies or separate divisions, created entities using their knowledge and expertise in fixed income markets, for example, or the equity markets, to create pricing in the crypto coins. And then they price into our central engine. And then we aggregate all that together. We create a custom laddered order book, because if you're mixing different book depths from different people with different price levels, you can get a very skewed picture out. So we do that sort of custom laddering in. It's actually not such a problem in market making, but it's a real problem if you're mixing a resale exchange like Binance with a market maker like Jane Street or something, because the market maker might have 10 or 20 levels of depth, whereas Binance might have 1,000 levels of depth. And so it becomes very difficult to read the order book. If you want to buy 10 Bitcoin, for example, you might end up doing 300-400 trades, which is not easy to track.
Sure.
So we sort of learned a few very specific things from there. So CryptoSwitch 2 now is focused on bringing in the best of the liquidity from market makers and the large exchanges, combining that together. Now, I should say we are not a venue. We are a platform. So we are not the counterparty to any of the trades. We are providing the technology to aggregate everything together so that the broker or fund or other, sometimes they call themselves exchanges and they're not, the entity on the end consuming the liquidity is getting the best possible price from the best possible options. One of the complications and the sort of wrinkles of this type of crypto market is if you've got 10 or 15 venues that you're using to execute against, you can't just have positions against all of them because it would be a settlement nightmare. It would be very, very inefficient on cash as well. So much like in the prime broking world in FX, in the real institutional world, you need to have something that is going to centralize and net out that type of that trading so that you end up with one set of positions. And there's a number of different ways that you can achieve that. We have 3 ways that we do that. So we work with Zero Hash to do daily net settlement. So at the end of every single day, Zero Hash, the company in the States, they work out net position between everybody and everyone else, and then they do the net cash movement so that everybody has paid the right people. Then you have FXCH, who is a clearinghouse. So we work with them on a number of our clients. And with them, it's slightly different because with a cleared model, it's the same as the equity clearing model or the futures clearing model. As soon as you trade with a counterparty, your trade is novated so that it's actually against the clearinghouse. And in a blockchain world, there is no time gap between that trade and that novation. So immediately the trade is done, it is novated into the clearinghouse. So you never actually need a trading contract with your market makers or your exchanges because you never trade with them. It's your position is always against the clearinghouse. So that's an interesting model because it's very efficient on cash usage because you only have one party that is your counterparty. You obviously have to have trust in the clearinghouse as the central counterparty in that model. And then the third model that we're working with is where you have they call themselves a prime broker. It's sort of a mixture between the FX world of a prime broker and a prime of prime because they are not just doing give ups, but they're actually providing credit as well. So it's a sort of mix, and that I think is a particularly good model for quite a lot of clients because again, it's very capital efficient. You need a very well capitalized entity who is the prime broker, and we're working with Hidden Road Partners on this, which is a very, very strong company to work with. And we're doing well on our client base across all of those 3 different models.
Great. That sounds pretty exciting. Well, with respect to crypto, I wanted to get your thoughts on, recently it's been labeled the crypto winter, right? We see this weakness in the price of crypto assets. We also see, interest in crypto assets or trading crypto assets kind of faded for some time because of the fall of prices in crypto assets. Some people are labeling it the crypto winter. I ask all of my guests if they agree with that characterization. Do you agree with that? Or do you think perhaps this was something that was sort of inevitable to happen? I think you mentioned that in the beginning of our podcast, you're the type of person who, if everything's going great, that means somewhere down the line, things are not going to go so great and you have to prepare for it. Is this something that we should have expected, from what I would argue is like a fairly young asset class?
Well, if anybody thinks that there's something is growing astronomically every single day and that's going to continue forever, then that's generally a Ponzi scheme and it will blow up at some point. So I'm not saying crypto is a Ponzi scheme. I'm just saying nothing is going to keep going up forever. And if anybody plans on that happening, then I think they're mistaken because it doesn't work like that. Everything goes in cycles. Now, what I would say, and I do call it a crypto winter, but it's a sort of period of pausing and reflection because the last time this happened, it was a massive collapse because there wasn't in 2017, because there was very little institutional support of the market. So it collapsed to almost nothing. This time, when we say it's collapsed, it's just around about $20,000 on Bitcoin today.
Mm-hmm.
That's considerably more than it was at its highest when it had collapsed. So it's quite interesting that it has stayed around there, and it's just sitting around there, bubbling around, and every now and again it pops up and down a bit and up and down a bit. And that, I believe, is entirely due to the institutional involvement that is in there, which is supporting it.
Mm-hmm.
What we are seeing is a continued, probably increasing amount, I would say, of inbound leads for digital asset systems, so our CryptoSwitch product for providing access to that liquidity, because this is the time when you want to be looking at the technology that's available, looking at the liquidity and planning, because we believe, and our clients who are looking at this believe very firmly, that the way that digital assets trade is superior to other things because of all of the blockchain technology. The way that you can transact internationally, the way you can trace things, it's a very, very efficient way of working, and a reliable way of working. And so this is here to stay, and this is a time when people are planning and working out what they're going to be doing going forward. So they're not all disappearing. Now, you have seen lower trading volumes because the trading volumes are almost directly proportional to the price of Bitcoin. So the amount, as it goes higher, people trade more because it's a smaller asset. So you do have that hype, but it is no longer driven by the retail trader as it was. It was almost entirely driven by what you read in the papers. The retail people will all go one way or go the other way. That's different now because I think it's now about sort of over 65% is institutional trading rather than retail. So it's driven, the drivers in it are different. So if you do have a big sort of retail backlash, it doesn't have the same effect that it had before.
Yeah, of course. And I wanted to ask, you mentioned liquidity and you mentioned sort of the evolution of CryptoSwitch, right? From sort of version 1 to version 2 to version 3. I'm venturing to guess that this whole situation with respect to, the correction that happened in the markets actually presents some opportunities for improvement for you guys, right? In terms of all of the things that you had described, because you could see the price movements that happened during the winter, quote unquote, right, or as the prices were going down. And I'm guessing it gives you guys, like you said, a point of reflection, but also time to actually think about like what's next, like what are we going to do next to improve this and really make this market or this asset class, make it advance and make it on par with FX and some of the other traditional sort of assets that we're all used to.
Yeah, you'd sort of think that if it was quieter in the market, then you'd have time to do all your development and you wouldn't have such big dev queues and it would all be a bit easier. But it doesn't seem to have worked out like that. We are incredibly busy in development. Like all of the partners we work with, it's all the same. They say, well, I'm absolutely maxed out on dev for the next 10 years. So I've just got to work out what I'm not going to do so that I can fit other things that I do want to do. So no, it's not gone quieter on that front, but it has allowed us to look at what is more important, which is things like that, the customized laddering in the order book, which other people don't have, because our clients have said, if I'm mixing in Binance and a market maker and I'm putting it into my platform and I want to see on the screen and my GUI, the order book, well, I can't show 2,000 levels of depth on the screen because I can't read it. And if I've got an algo trading that, it's just too hard work. It's too heavy on CPU processing to go down the book that much. So we've put a lot of work in really optimizing the feeds from every single market maker and exchange, and then bringing it down into levels that the liquidity consumer wants to see. So they might want 1 Bitcoin, 2 Bitcoin, 5 Bitcoin, 10 Bitcoin, or whatever they want. They can customize it. And so things like that have come out. That make it just much easier for them to consume. The other thing that I think is a big driver is we don't believe that once it's regulated, the people that will trade it, so the funds, will be using bespoke front ends. They will be using platforms that they use now. If you're a fund and you've got a trading platform, you've got a PMS and an OMS and an EMS, you're not going to stick another platform in parallel with that. With another screen, another back office, another middle office to trade a new asset class just because it's a new asset class.
Mm-hmm.
If the regulation allows you, which it will, allows you to mix it in with your other asset classes, so you can trade some Bitcoin, you can trade some fixed income, and you can trade some equities and futures all together, then you will do that through the same platform. And then that where CryptoSwitch comes in is just another execution point. So whilst you'll send your equities out to maybe an exchange, you'll have a CryptoSwitch implementation to send your Bitcoin or whatever other coins you want to the most efficient place to execute, and it will then go through your own internal management systems and be displayed on the front end screens that your people are currently using. That's what I see. That's where I feel that it's going, because that's the most efficient way to do it. I've been in trading a very, very long time and started in the futures markets in the trading pits of Life and the IPE, and that's exactly what we saw there. Was what was wanted was one consolidated trading platform that would source liquidity and assets from different places. So that's always been the nirvana, is a single platform that the front end sees with the complexity behind it to be able to route it to the right place.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I totally agree. And I think, one of the things that I've heard from industry executives and thought leaders is market data is actually playing a very big role as well. Obviously that may not specifically relate to crypto at this point, but in terms of traditional assets and this idea of all asset, right? Whether you're an institutional trading firm or a retail broker, it seems like a lot of companies are rushing to get any kind of asset that they can, any tradable asset that they can, on a trading platform to offer to their either retail investors or basically, even institutional investors these days, including crypto. And it's becoming ever more complex in terms of the price data, the market data that's associated with it that is needed, right, to make decisions, to do analysis, and to trade. It seems like the things are getting ever more complex in the trading space.
Yeah, they are. The economics of each asset class is different as well, because in the equities and the futures world, you've got to pay the exchange for data, but in the crypto world, you don't. So it's a bit like the FX world where you don't pay for data. So I remember what's one of the things that when we have spoken to retail FX brokers in the past, and they say they want to add equities, so many of them have absolutely no idea that you can't just take an equity feed from an exchange or from Reuters or Refinitiv, as they are now, add it into your platform and trade against it. You have to pay a lot. And in fact, it's frequently much more expensive to pay those fees than you're going to make from the trading. So there used to be an enormous amount of fraud, I would guess you'd call, where people were stealing prices from other places, which we would just say, no, you just can't do that. It's just, you're going to get caught, so don't do it. And when they catch you, they won't just say, oh, you now need to pay us money. The exchanges will go back 5 years and say, well, you've had access to this data for 5 years for your thousands of clients. You need to pay us millions of pounds. So, and I know that from working at exchanges, that they have huge departments that are responsible for making sure they get paid for data. It's a really big push for them.
Yeah.
So that's a difference with the crypto stuff, that there is no fee for data. Every exchange you can connect to for free and get the public API to get a stream of pricing. So if you just want a stream of Binance's price, and you've got some technologies to be able to implement to it, it's it's perfectly possible at no cost. If you want to trade, it's a bit different. You do have to pay for that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely, of course. Well, you actually earlier alluded to sort of how GoldEye came about, and I wanted to ask you about. I saw that you have a broad range of experience in the financial industry. I think from New York, NYSE, Reuters, ODL Securities. Is there something in terms of knowledge and experiences that you had at these former employers, so to say, that gave you the impotence to launch a company of your own, and that company being GoldEye?
Yeah, I always found that I thought some of the decisions that people made were sort of hurried and not really based on the right data, and they weren't necessarily correct. And I thought, well, when I was more junior, I thought, well, I must be wrong, because these people are senior; they must know what they're talking about. And then as you sort of get a bit more experience, you realize, no, they probably don't always know what they're talking about. They probably just go through go through the minutes, decide what they're going to make a decision on, and do it fairly quickly without sort of thinking through the consequences. So I always felt that I was probably right on some things that I should have spoken up on before.
Mm-hmm.
It's very difficult starting, certainly in the UK, it's very difficult starting a business because there maybe is now, but there wasn't a mindset of starting your own business with the risk of failure, because failure is very much seen as a business not succeeding is seen as you have failed. So, and that is bad.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas in the States, it's a different approach. You've had 4 or 5 goes, they've gone bust, you start again, and that's not considered bad. That's okay because you tried things and one didn't work, another one didn't work, this one did work. Here it's a little bit different. It was considered different. Now there are more entrepreneurs, there are more times, it is more opportunity to start things. Funding is different as well here. It's much harder to get VC funding in the UK. It certainly was almost impossible when I started. Than it was in the States. We are not funded by anybody. We are bootstrapped. We live on the money that we earn, and we don't have any debt or investment from anybody because that's the way we decided to go. So we are completely in control of what we want to do. If we want to spend a whole load of money and not a load of cash, not make any money, we can do that. If we want to invest more in something, we can do that. If we want to make lots of money, not employ anyone, we can do that too. So it is very nice to be able to be flexible and free like that. So I think I learned from sitting on various boards in various companies that the decisions people make are not always the best ones, and sometimes it's their personality that means they're making that decision. They want to be the person making the decision because they're a dominant character, but they're not necessarily the best. I would say another thing that has been really important with me is always to employ people that are better than you. So why would I employ people and then do their job for them? All the people that I employ beneath me in my management team are better than me because they're the experts in their particular fields. I'm a generalist. I'm a software developer by background, so I was a C programmer, but I don't do that anymore. It might be quite fun every now and again to have a play, but I don't. But the experts that we have in that area, really are experts. But I think for me, it's nice the fact that I've come through that route, so I can talk to the developers and I know what I'm talking about.
Yep.
But I can't go in and do the architectural design and look at the glasses and all the code and do a better job than they would do in any way. So always employ people that are better than you. Then you're going to get the best out of everybody.
Just really quickly, I'm curious to know, why is venture capital funding so difficult to get in the UK? Is it regulatory restrictions?
No, I think it's just cultural. I just think it's just the American culture is just different. It's opportunistic. You just look at the way the country developed, I think is very different as well.
Sure.
Britons went out and conquered the world, whereas Americans all came together. They had to make it themselves because a long, long time ago, that's all there was. And so it's just developed in a different way. Anybody can be on top in the States. There is no limits. We have class systems. It's just a different place.
Understood. Yeah, I understand. And you had mentioned computer programming, something that you had studied. I saw that on your LinkedIn profile that I think you studied engineering at university, and then you got an MBA in finance later on. I always ask my guests about what role education played in their lives and careers. For example, some of my previous guests, said that math and science and engineering was something that they were exposed to in school at an early age, and then kind of gave them, it gave them sort of an early start to think about, well, what do I want to do when I grow up? The quintessential question. And quite a few of them sort of, it started that path from an early age for them, through lower education, higher education, whatever we may call it, right? Just regular school, university, and so on. That played a role. Wondering kind of what your experience was like in the UK growing up.
Yeah, I mean, I was always fascinated by technology and sound equipment. And actually, I was a DJ. I had my own mobile disco, which was called the Thunderbolt Roadshow, from the age of about 11 to 17. And I had a friend who had a van who was a couple of years older than me, and we used to drive it around in the earlier years, my parents used to drive me around, and we used to do the local discos with all the lighting, and we built all our own equipment. We built our amplifiers and got record decks, and you actually, when you're being a DJ then, and you actually played records, and rather than creating music, you were playing other people's music, and it's a little bit different now being a DJ. So I was very interested in that, and I love, because of all that and my interest in electronics, I always wanted to be an electronics engineer. And so I didn't really look into what electronics engineers did. I got a place at King's College in University of London on the electronic engineering course, studied that, turned that into a 4-year degree by spending a year in industry designing telephone systems and things like that. And by the end of it, I realized I really didn't want to be an electronic engineer at all. And the bit that was interesting was on the last year, they brought in some digital electronics or computing onto the course, which was fairly new. And we were I designed a multi-processor system called a transputer, which older people will know about, but other people weren't, using a programming language called Occam, which was a very early multiprocessor type language, very difficult to use, and you had to really tell it how to multiprocess rather than the system working out itself. But that experience in that last year taught me that I really wanted to go into software. And so when I went into work, I started at PA Consulting Group, and the project I was on was at Life to implement the first trading platform, which is called APT, Automated Pit Trading. And there'll be a number of people who listen to this will have heard of that platform. And it was like a video game. So you would choose who you traded with, and you click on them, and then like little arrows would shoot between the two of you, and then you would trade. That then moved on to more of a model where you had like a picture of a pit, and people would be around the pit, and you'd put your bid and offers in, and then it would match the two together. And then eventually that went and turned into what was Life Connect, which became an order matching system where you didn't see who was in the pit at all. In fact, you didn't see anybody, and it was just order book matching, which is a much more efficient, if not as pretty, way of doing trading. So what I learned at university was probably the programming side of it and the logical side of things, because logic is incredibly important in software engineering, because it's not just about programming. It's all about architectural design, building something that is supportable, scalable, saleable, manageable, that has log files that you can read, alerts that mean something to the person that's reading it in the middle of the night. So it's a much bigger thing. I was at a company called the International Petroleum Exchange after PA, and I had a really good boss there, a chap called Mike O'Donnell, and he was really good because he said you need to extend your education, and he'd done an MBA at I think it was Open University, and he said, well, why don't you look to find an MBA to do, because it will really extend your knowledge of business. And so I found one at Cass Business School, which was in the Barbican, and I was working in London at the time. So 2 years, and at the end of the working day at about 6 p.m., I'd then walk across the Barbican, and then we had lectures from about 6:30 p.m. until 11:30 p.m. each day, and then weekends it was tutorials and working together on projects. So that was a really hard 2 years, but I did that before children, and it was really interesting because I don't think I learned any facts that I would use specifically, but everything I learned in every of the subjects allowed me to understand how that worked. So I knew nothing about marketing before. And having done the marketing courses, I knew how to approach a marketing problem. I knew how to talk to marketing people, and I understood their language. It was the same with the finance side, corporate finance side, HR, organizational skills, across the board. Everything that we learned in there was taught me to be able to think wider. So I thoroughly recommend something like an MBA, but don't do it as soon as you've done your degree. Do it a few years afterwards, once you've got a bit of experience under your belt, because then you've got something to compare it with.
Yeah, sure. And I also noticed that during your years of study, I think in school and maybe during university, you were a member of clubs or societies called rifle clubs. I wanted to ask you, are you like an avid hunter or shooter? Because I know that those types of sports and activities, I think, are historically and culturally popular in the UK.
They are. I don't shoot animals. When I was at school, so I was at a grammar school called the Royal Grammar School in Guildford, which is actually just down the road from where our office is now. There they had there's a thing called the CCF, which is very popular in UK schools, Combined Cadet Force. So it's combined Army, Air Force, and soldiers, and Navy. Sorry, and once a week you put your uniform on. We were all doing army type stuff, and then you'd march around pretending to be soldiers, and then you could do things like shooting, so target shooting. So we're very lucky in Surrey because the world's most important and biggest shooting range is just down the road from us, a place called Bisley Ranges, and it's been there for 130 years. So it's all Victorian buildings, and it's beautiful. It's never really changed. So we used to go there every Wednesday and every Saturday with school to shoot, and it's a very sociable sport. You know, you're all lying down together shooting at big paper targets, 3/4 of a mile away, so it's quite a long distance, but with no telescopes or anything. So you're just learning how to read the wind and stay very still, adjust for any environmental conditions that are changing, and then you shoot. Depending on what the actual competition is, you might shoot 2 sightings shots and then 7 or 2 and then 10 to count, and then you compete against each other. And there's a big competition called the Imperial, which has about 3,000 people attend once a year. And I used to do that for years and years and years. And then when I left school and went to university, I went to London University, and a lot of people from my school went to London. So at one point, the whole London University rifle team were from my school. So we didn't really know whether we were shooting as the old Guildfordians, which was my school club, or as the London school, as the London University team. But I carried on doing that for a number of years, and I still do that a bit. Not quite so much now because I'm quite busy. But the school team, I was never that good. But the old Guildfordians team is one of the best in the world now. They win absolutely everything. But I haven't shot in any of those teams. I'm afraid I can't claim anything to do with them being that good. They are just amazing. I think it helps the fact that the school is really near the ranges, so they can go regularly to practice.
Well, yeah, because you need the facilities to be able to do that, right?
Yes, absolutely.
And am I understanding correctly that in this type of sport, when you are competing with each other, you're basically scored on how accurate your shot is, right, from a specific distance. So the farther it is away from what we call a bullseye, the less sort of the score that you get per shot or something like that. Am I correct?
That's right. Yeah. So what it is it's if you're shooting at the longest range that I used to shoot at, which is 1,000 yards.
Wow.
And we still shoot in yards in the UK. We don't use meters for shooting. So 1,000 yards, which is a very long way. You don't have any telescopic sights. You're just using the naked eye, and you've got metal sights. So you've got a ring at the end of the barrel, and then 2 rings at the bit nearer your head. You line all of them up, and then you focus that on the center of the target. Now, the target looks pretty small. And if it's raining, it's very difficult to see because of the rain in the way. If it's windy or there's a heat haze, it'll move around in front of you because of the heat haze. And so you're lining all that up, and you squeeze the trigger very gently, because if you squeeze the trigger too hard, you'll move the gun because of the pressure on the trigger, because they're very heavy triggers on these big guns. They're 1 or 2 kilograms you've got to pull, rather than the short distance ones, which might be 1 or 2 grams. So you've got to pull pretty hard. For safety is the real reason. And if it gets right in the middle, that's called a V-bull. If it goes slightly out a bit more, then that's a bull. And if it's then out from that, you get an inner, and then it's a magpie, and then it's an outer on the outside, which you really don't want to get.
I see.
The V-bull is very close in the middle. V-bull's worth 5.1, bull's worth 5, inner's 4, magpie's 3, and outer's 2. And if you miss, you get nothing.
And so on and so on. Wow, very interesting. Yeah, definitely very interesting. You mentioned DJ, and this was one of my last questions of the show, but I figured I'd ask you now. I actually DJ'd myself at the tail end of my high school education. I started dabbling in vinyl records and a mixer, as they call it.
Excellent. That's what we
these
have
days. And then that really progressed. Like, I went to college. I basically, it was a hobby. It wasn't really like a career or anything. It was really a hobby to make some extra money on the weekends, playing small clubs and bars in New York, and where I went to college. And, things progressed from vinyl to CDs. And then we are now in the digital age, right, where everybody can be a DJ just by using their cell phone or computer. But I guess what I wanted to say is because I had sort of this exposure to DJing, and I played some whatever musical instruments, also casually, in school. Today I have this very broad sort of interest in music, like extremely broad. Do you find that you have the same because, early on in your life, you were exposed to all these different types of music, and you played different types of music because I'm sure you had different crowds to please while you guys were performing. Sort of what are Tom's musical tastes these days?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm an avid music lover, and I go to, lots of concerts a year when we haven't got lockdowns and things. We might go to 4 or 5. We go to festivals. We're going to a festival as a family in Leeds, BBC Two Radio 2 Festival in Leeds in about a month's time, or 3 weeks' time actually, which is all sort of 80s bands. So yes, I do. I think if you said I had to tell you my favourite, it would be Pink Floyd. Absolutely fantastic music. I've seen Pink Floyd play as Pink Floyd when I was a student. They played in Earl's Court, which is quite special. And then I've seen all of the individual people who are still alive playing together. And I've been driven around a racetrack by Nick Mason in his Ferrari once.
Wow.
Which was incredible because there was a bit of a delay being able to go around the racetrack. And so I got to sit in the car with him for an hour while they got it ready, chatting to him about whether the Pink Floyd would get back together again, what he thought of Roger Waters, and everyone else. It was absolutely fantastic. But I when I did my disco, it was very much the time period was very much disco music. So,
sure.
Like sort of Donna Summer and things like that. So real proper dancey stuff. But we used to do a sort of bit of mixing together. And so I remember mixing AC/DC with Devo and things like that. So yeah, I've got quite that, and B-52s and things like that. So I've got quite a broad knowledge, and Talking Heads as well. Another particular favourite, Kate Bush.
Sure.
Yeah, I like lots of stuff. I really can't get my head around rap though. I think I'm just the wrong generation.
I was going to ask you.
Like it.
Yeah.
I can't do it.
What about like what they call house music today, like house music?
Yeah, I like that. Yeah. My daughter told me. So we've got 4 children, and our 17-year-old is probably more interested in music than the others. And she's talking about liquid house, and I quite like that actually because that's sort of, that's sort of very really good rhythm and sort of gets your feet going. So yeah, that's okay. But she started. My elder daughter, who's 19, I took her to the Pink Floyd exhibition in London, which is called Their Mortal Remains at the V&A Museum, and she absolutely loved it because they had all of the equipment they used to make all of the albums. Dark Side of the Moon, Animals, Wish You Were Here, all those ones. The actual equipment, the Moog synthesizers and everything in there. And she was astonished at the whole process that you use to make music is so much more complicated than it is to some people where you sit in front of an Apple laptop and you just press buttons on it. They then had to work very hard to get those sound effects that they wanted to get. So she liked seeing Pink Floyd. And then actually she came with me and my eldest son, who's 21 now, to see Roger Waters in Hyde Park, to see the Us and Them concert, which was outrageous. It was so good.
No, that's awesome to sort of, teach, not necessarily teach your kids, but expose them to all of this history in classical rock music. Because, for me, I think Pink Floyd, Led Zeppelin, a lot of these legendary bands will probably live on forever. They will be eternally popular by many, many generations of people, long after you and I are, I think, or at least I hope at this point.
Yeah, what we used to do actually with our children when they were little, so when I'd read them bedtime stories, and we have a 9-year-old now, we have a little one as well. We do something called ME, which is musical education. So we'll read them a bedtime story, and then I'll play them some sort of classic bit of rock or some free or something like that, a Free Bird or something like that, just so that they can understand some music as well. And I think that maybe that's why they've got such a sort of broad understanding of music too.
Yeah, and I think it's I think including music in a personal educational curriculum or in school, I think is very important. I had that as a child growing up, and definitely found it to be very, very enlightening and useful actually later on in life, in terms of music playing a role. So definitely. Here's another thing I wanted to ask. I would argue that Tom Higgins might win the award for Best Dressed. at the conferences that we normally attend. And I'm sure you've gotten comments about this, and I hope they're pleasant ones regarding sort of your clothing attire at conferences. I wanted to ask, if it's not too personal of a question, where did the passion for colorful clothing come from?
I think it was being a rebel. So when I started working in the city, I just could not wear a dark suit and white shirt. And so I'd sort of push it a bit, and I'd wear a dark suit and I'd wear a flowery shirt, I think I started with flowery ties and then moved on to flowery shirts and then moved on to brighter suits. And I just don't like conforming in any way. I mean, we have a sort of motto in our house that rules are to be broken. So anything where, I once turned up to Citibank in New York in a purple suit and a flowery shirt, and they thought an alien had landed. I don't think they'd ever seen anyone not in a blue suit and a white shirt. So yes, I love wearing different things. And someone said to me once, I said, how do you do it? Is it not just too embarrassing wearing something that's that bright? So you just don't notice after a while. So no, I love it. I mean, there is a change in I have my bright blue glasses I've had for years and years and years, but unfortunately my dog ate them on holiday.
Oh.
And I can't get them anymore. So you will see me in different glasses.
Different glasses?
At the trade show in Bangkok. So we'll see how well they go down. But, she completely consumed them. I found her chewing them on holiday in Korea, which is unfortunate.
Yeah, I find it awkward that somebody's asking you whether it's embarrassing or not. I don't see anything embarrassing. I mean, we live in the 21st century. We live in we live in free countries. We travel to free countries, for work and these conferences. I mean, we're all free to wear whatever we want. It's nothing exuberant or anything like that. It is colorful. I enjoy it, Tom, personally. When I see you, I'm like, oh, that's Tom. I know that's Tom because of the attire. I mean, I've gotten comments about, oh, you're overdressed or something like that in a conference, and I said, maybe it's a quintessential American saying, but dress for the job you want, not the job you have. Things like that. So, that's certainly interesting, and I think, Tom, you should continue the tradition. I don't think there's anything wrong with it. If anybody gives you help for it, send them my way. Send them my way. Yeah, and so one of my last questions is, you and I, again, we travel to all these conferences. Sometimes we're actually on the same plane. Believe it or not, we might not run into each other, but I might see you down a few rows or something like that. And I have sort of my pet peeves or sort of my travel, sort of the ways I go about traveling, right, to make things comfortable for me. And I think I saw from a distance that you're the same way. Can you share a few of sort of your traveling life hacks or Tom's travel tips? Because, you have a lot of experience traveling internationally, especially probably long distances to places like Asia, the US, Australia, and things like that. How do you, sort of maintain focus during these long trips so that you have enough time to rest? You can stay on top of your work and other responsibilities you have, and then also have the conferences and your attendance and participation in these conferences be fruitful. I
like the long plane journeys because it's very rare now you get a time when it's just you on your own, and you've got, it depends, I'm in Bangkok, it's 8 hours, I think, on my own, and no one is going to disturb me. I never connect to the Wi-Fi on airplanes now that I have it, because that's such a nice time where you just can't get disturbed. I don't, there's always somebody who's going to deal with anything that we've got going on in the office. I don't need to be that person, because we've got, as I say, employing people better than me. They will always deal with these sort of things. Personally, I like to listen to Audible, so I will download a few books. I sometimes watch films, but not really. I don't tend to watch films on airplanes that much. It's more Audible or read a book, because you can really get stuck into it. Some nice champagne, that's always nice. Enjoy the food on the airplane. If it's a longer flight and they provide you alcohol very kindly, then I think you should take them up on that. If I'm attending nowadays, I tend to speak or moderate at conferences rather than just attend, because I'm so old that people ask me to do these sort of things.
Oh,
In
please.
fact, my 9-year-old son thinks, he says, when I was young, did we have dinosaurs as our pets? He thinks I'm that old. I put a lot of preparation
Jeez.
into the panels that I'm doing if I'm moderating, because I think it's really important to prepare beforehand so that you can give a really good panel, so that the people who are listening are getting something out of it, and brief all of the people that are on the panel that that they're there to educate people. They're not there to broadcast what they do. They're there to give their expertise about whatever their skill is. So I put a lot of expertise, a lot of energy into making sure that the panel will run smoothly on time. Everybody's there. Everyone knows everyone else. Everyone knows what they're doing. It's not always been the case. There's been some I've done where people turn up, they do a product pitch, which is terrible. This is when I've been a speaker on a panel. But now I'm a moderator. I try much harder to make sure that people won't do that. So there's a lot of preparation that goes into that you don't necessarily see. If I'm doing something where I'm talking on camera or I'm talking on radio, I will mentally prepare beforehand, but I will never ever write anything down that I'm going to talk about in detail. It's all ideas, it's all concepts that I want to talk about, because I find I can't remember anything where I want to just read it off pat. But if I'm just talking from my heart, it flows. So I always say to people who want to talk, just have an idea of where you want to get to, and then have those ideas as points, sort of sign points, and talk around those ideas, and then it'll sound what it is, which is real and from the heart.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. Actually, this leads to my last question. The fall conference season is actually kicking off next week, like in full swing. Are you going to be hosting a panel at the IFX Expo, perhaps in Bangkok, or any of the shows coming up? I think there's one in Dubai in October. Then there's the London Summit.
Yeah, so I'm moderating a panel on technology trends in Bangkok. Which I'm very excited about. That's going to be a really good one, because that's the first panel of the event. So I think it's about 10:30 or 10:45 in the morning. So that's the first day. So that's really exciting. London, I'll be doing something, but I don't know which one it is yet. Dubai, haven't decided yet what we're doing about that one. And there are so many coming up in the crypto world as well, which are in parallel. So we've done Hedge Week ones, we've done New Data ones. There's lots of different ones we're doing. There's a FT Live coming up too. So there are lots, and we've got to sort of decide how we spread ourselves across these things, because they're quite time consuming. So yes, they're really important, and I do like doing them.
A last question. So the flight to Bangkok, are you flying directly from London? How long is that flight?
I think it's 8.5 or 9 hours or something like that.
Oh, so that's not as bad as it would be, let's say, because I looked it up from, if I had to travel from New York. And it's
the longest I've done is Sydney, which was 23 and a half hours of travel, which is a very long
very long trip. And was that one long flight, or
no, they've only just started doing non-stop flights to Sydney from London. You used to have to stop. So I think I stopped in Singapore for like an hour or something, got off and got back on again, which does make a difference to stopping. I like to stop and get off and get on again. It just breaks it up. So it's 2 long flights rather than one very, very long flight. So I'm not sure I'd want to do the really non-stop one. I'm not sure what the benefit of that 1 extra hour saving is.
Yeah. Makes sense. Well, Tom, thanks a lot for taking the time to join us. I'm glad that I got to speak with you. We wish you safe travels, actually, because the show is starting. The first conference is next week. We wish you the best of luck. And I personally hope to see you in London, because I hope to attend that conference in November. And perhaps also sometime soon we could do another podcast and discuss some other interesting.
That would be fantastic, and thank you so much for spending the time talking to me. It's been really enjoyable. I loved it very much, and looking forward to seeing you in London as well. Thank you.
Yes, thanks.
Bye-bye.
Cheers. Have a great day. Thanks for listening to our latest Finance Feeds podcast episode. For sponsorship opportunities or to become a guest, please email us at info@financefeeds.com.